Welcome back to Let's Get It podcast. Joining us for the second half of our interview with Don Wickstrom. Hope you enjoy.
See, a lot of this stuff you're talking about, though, too, goes back to how people are brought up, the whole family dynamic, right? And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about is lost because of how much is lost at those levels.
Yeah.
And again, that's probably another way where, again, rely on us. We're here to help you. We're the federal government. And I think people believe that for so long. Maybe that's why some of these family dynamics are where they're at, right? And people are feeling that.
Well, look at the WEF, right? The World Economic Forum. Why is it that they're so openly advertising, by 2030 you'll own nothing and you'll be happy?
Right.
Yep.
Well, everybody's like, well, we're not that stupid. No, you are. We all are.
Right.
Because here's what they mean. We'll make everything so expensive that if we offer you, instead of owning it, you can have a lot less bills per month by just leasing it, right? By just renting it, by just, and we're talking everything from cars to food to everything else to your land, that's better. So if we can drive up the cost to where you can't really afford it, but all of a sudden we have a better solution for you to afford it. And it comes into where, I have some weird theories on where that'll go. But I think, honestly, when we look at that, but part of it is the value that we think something intrinsically has. We're in the first generation that is now adults, where they didn't look at long-term debt.
Right.
They only look at what the payment is. We've never had that before in history.
Well, and we talk about that all the time in real estate. That's a big thing in real estate. Because it's not about, again, people are like, well, I'm going to wait to buy a house till rates come down. Well, then it's going to be more expensive because it's not about the price at all.
No. Nope.
It's not about the price at all. It's about that monthly payment.
Right. And that's, it's like, okay, well, let's talk. If it was about price, they would weather the interest rate, right? And so I think we just see a lot of bad decisions being made, which would push that, and what's going to be interesting is what is the reset that's going to happen?
Right.
Right? Like, what happens if all of a sudden our government is trillions of dollars more efficient? Right? And I don't know how you guys are, but I truly sign up for the economic theory that the only way inflation happens is because the government intervenes.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way because in a capitalistic, it's always supply demand. And what happens is it's a whip, right? If demand's really high for something and the price of it goes way up, people run to that until the value prop's gone. But then it sucks money from other entities. And what happens is now that becomes cheaper, and then people pivot. It's been proven throughout time. We started screwing with it after World War II, right?
Yeah.
And we really messed with it. And so all these things are different, right? And so, if we're going to get into that, then it's also shaped the way other things behave, how the stock market behaves. I tell everybody, like, I used to trade a lot during the day and in the morning and stuff, and I loved it. And my friends were like, what's your strategy? I said, I play on people's emotions. I never got emotionally attached. I looked at the people that were emotionally attached, and you look for that. The problem is the stock market behaves in a way that doesn't always make sense, right? And it's a great thing. I love the stock market. But what really changes when the government started to mess with it. And its propensity changed and its attitude. Like, why is Bitcoin so high?
Right.
There's no one in their right mind that if they had a $100 bill, they get in their car, they start the car up. It's $100 when they put their key in the ignition. They drive to the grocery store, they load up their groceries, and they get to the grocery store checkout, and all of a sudden that $100 bill is only worth $50. Everybody lose their marbles. But when it goes the other way, that it was worth $100, and by the time I get to the cashier, it's $1,000.
Right.
They're all fat and happy with it.
Yeah.
Now, do I think there's a place for Bitcoins and stuff? 100%. I think it makes me a little nervous because you got the World Economic Forum, you've got Bitcoin, and then you've got demands of how you're going to purchase things, which I think then lead to some stuff in Revelations, which makes me nervous. But you have all this stuff. Where am I going with this? I know I'm kind of getting winded.
You're good.
I think we have to remember that when we look at all of this that comes into play, whether it be money or finances or real estate. Like I got real estate. We're closing a deal this month, and I invest, right? I've got companies I've invested in, things like that. We look at all of that. Capitalism is the best way to make sure everybody's okay, because it allows it sustainable. And I was going to say, all this wraps in, so you entrepreneurs, this is what you need to listen to, hopefully. The best business deals where both parties are happy. Right?
I agree.
100%. That may mean you have to give a little and I have to give a little. But if we both walk away. Number 2 is
why do both sides want to be happy?
Both sides.
I want to hear your answer on that. What your thoughts are?
Like why they need to be happy?
Yeah.
Or
Why is both sides?
Both sides need to be happy.
I think about it from one angle is because I want to do another deal with that person.
Right.
That's one. What is your...
Here's where it premised from. So there's 2 things. One is I had a lady, Jan Crandall was her name. She was vice president of Woodford State Bank in Monroe, Wisconsin. I met her midway through my career at Quest, owning Quest. She became a mentor. And I had a customer that was a big part of my business at that time. But they beat me up all the time. And they never seemed happy. And I was miserable. And I never made money. Every single job of theirs was like 1%. And she said, Don, you can never have anybody, if you allow someone to base your relationship on a dollar bill, the minute the dollar bill dries up, they will be gone.
Yeah.
But if you base the relationship on a relationship and mutual respect and understanding, you both will stand the test of time. And what I mean by that, by both sides being happy, is both sides in a business deal should feel like they got their fair share. And the reason being is that person can stand and say, hey, I got value. The person that sold it can say, hey, I got profit. And what happens is next time, because you've started that dialogue, they're going to come back. They're going to think about you. Like, it was worth it. This was a great experience. They met me where I was at. We're happy. And I always tell entrepreneurs, you cannot be mad for what you gave up to somebody. You decided to do that.
Yeah.
Even if they demand it, well, I won't do business. Okay. Sometimes, so that customer I was telling you about, I fired them. Mm-hmm. They had just given me a new PO. I said, I'm not doing it. Go to the competitor. And we stopped doing it. You know what's funny is, like, I learned very early on, no business is better than bad business, you know. But when you have both sides that are happy, and I learned this a lot in VC negotiations. You know, I'll coach sales. Like, you got an owner who's selling, I'll help coach them, right? I'm not a broker. I just help coach. But you got to constantly keep it. I said, listen, everybody wants to be happy when we walk away. So what's going to make you guys happy and what's going to make you happy? Like, let's really talk about that. And most of the time it's money. But in that, if you're both happy, number one is you feel like there's value, you feel like you both added something to it. That's what we forget. If we're selling something to somebody, we want them to feel like they did contribute, because they are contributing. But they also must understand, I have to make a profit. I used to feel bad about making a profit. It was really weird. And then finally, I had a customer come up to me. He's like, Don, we're in the middle of Pack Expo, big event. We unveiled our box spot, awesome piece of equipment. And he's like, Don, do you want to be here next year? I'm like, 100%. He says, I've seen you grow because your prices haven't changed. He says, I'm going to tell you something right now. He says, you go down that aisle. They've got a really poopy piece of equipment that's supposed to do this. Go ask them how much they're getting for that. So I walk down there. They're asking double. And I'm like, what? He's like, listen, I've never given you a PO. You know why? And I'm like, no, why is that? He says, because I'm afraid you won't be in business next year. And every year you surprise me. He says, so whatever you figured out, great. But he says, you're killing yourself for nothing. And he says, if you promise me you'll sell this machine to me for 50% higher than what you're selling it for right now, he says, I'll buy 10 of them. He says, I need you to stay in business. So if you have that good mutual experience, you can then remind them, like, hey, you know why I'm charging this? Because I want to be here for you tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go through this whole process again.
Yeah.
And they'll remind you, like, hey, you want me to be here next time you're
Let's start to come
around?
up with some of the, because we're starting to get some pretty good pricing on some of this stuff where it comes back, I'm like, this is what they want for that? Where I'm like, how are they going to keep doing that?
Right.
Like, we got a guy that does some remove some landscaping, install some stone and stuff like that. I'm like, his pricing, I'm like, oh my God. We were talking about this, and our team was talking about it. Like, how is he doing? I'm like, he should be doing all of our projects, but like, how is he still going to be around?
But can he? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
had to have that talk. One of my vendors, I love him to death, and he's doing work for me. I finally told him, said, listen, I love what you're doing, but we can't continue to work like this. He's like, what have I done wrong? I said, bump it up. He's like, what? I said, do another 7%. I said, I need you to stay in business. And he's like, you're
Probably
telling me
what
to
we should
charge
tell
more.
this guy.
Because I want to be. If they
for
do
sure.
good work, why not? And
Right.
I've found myself before. I bought a truck. I've really felt bad for this guy. This young man gets this whole truck done. He had built it for 2 years. Tree falls on it.
Oh,
Guess what he didn't have on it?
Oh, no.
Total loss.
Yeah.
So he's got on the internet for like next to nothing. So I said, man, I'll buy it. He's like, you're not going to negotiate me down? I'm like, no, I'll pay what you got for it. And he brings it. I mean, he's in tears. And he keeps telling me about, like, because he knew that I had a speed shop. And so he's just in tears talking about how much work. And he showed me, I mean, it's all crunched, but he's like showing me, like, here, I did this, and show me. And I looked at him, and I just shared some things with him. And I said, listen, what are you going to do with this money? He's like, well, I got to pay off the bank. This is why I only want that much for it. I got to pay the bank off. And I said, then you're left with nothing. But I said, look at all the experience you gained. And he's like, yeah, that's true. So I don't think I'll do a project like this again. I said, no. See, you're learning the wrong thing here. You did what a lot of people couldn't. Mm-hmm. What you need to do is insure it next time.
Right. Everyone insures that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people can't do what you did.
Right. And he's like, oh, man, I never thought about that. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, I noticed that you knocked down the price twice. No one wanted to buy it, right? But you knocked it down twice. So I said, here's another $800 for where you started. He's like, what? I said, invest it.
Yeah.
Invest it in something that's going to give you a gain.
Yeah.
And I said, if you buy another vehicle and you can fix it up like you did this one, I said, you'll make a profit. I felt so bad for him.
Did you ever follow up with that kid?
Huh?
Did you ever follow up with that kid?
I did. He's doing all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing good.
Good.
He flipped 2 cars already.
Nice. Sweet. That's awesome.
So, and it's
story,
only
too.
been like 2 months. And so what he's going to, kind of what I told him is take this 800, buy a car. If it's an $800 car, make it run, fix it up, sell it for a little bit, and just keep doing that a few times. And I said, then what you can do is you can bankroll your next project like this. And I said, because he had remarkable skills. He painted the truck. He did all the body work. He did the wiring. I mean, the interior, he did a great job. He just needed to insure it. And so he'll build that bankroll. I said, then that way you don't got to, you can get to a point where you can leverage the bank,
Yep. Yeah.
And he's like, all right.
So what'd you do? What was your business all about, and what'd you do for those 17 years, kind of between when you started that business to then when you got cancer and sold it?
So it was a robotics company.
Okay. Did a lot with cheese, is what the documentary
did a
said.
lot with cheese, a lot with produce.
Yeah.
And so, and we loved it. And
So you would like help build things that would automate people's
Mm-hmm.
factories.
yeah, we did everything from like doing something as simple as taking this bag and putting it in a box because someone was standing there doing that.
Yeah.
So here, robotics has a bad reputation. Oh, they're taking jobs. I didn't tell people this until really I sold Quest. For every robot we sold, about 3 years later, they would ask for more robots because when you get one robot in, you become more competitive. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times what would happen is we wouldn't tell customers this, but like, okay, we're going to sell you a robot, but you're going to grow so much that you're going to need more labor and you won't be able to find it. And time again, it proved it. And then we got into the last years there with what I call the organic labor crisis. The organic labor crisis was we had baby boomers who were dying off and retiring. We had this whole push of big data, which at that time everybody was really friendly with big data. But I told them, I said, they're our worst nemesis because they're producing nothing and they're going to take a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And then I said, then AI will get better and all of a sudden we'll have a plethora of people, but they won't have any skills. So we had this shortage of labor, which our robots really took off. And so when you continue to do that, we had people who were worried about jobs, but honestly, for every robot we put in, there was typically 3.5 more jobs created.
Within that year time?
Within 2 years.
In that company?
In that company.
And that was to do what?
That was anything. So
ancillary because like they needed another accounts receivable person. They needed another,
Right.
or
or another person further down the line because the throughput went up, or they got another product line. Typically,
so if you have a stopping point for a product or a transition point of A, B, C, D, and someone orders a robot for part B and takes the people away there, now down the line, instead of 2 people at part C and D, they needed 4 at each of those spots because of that.
Exactly. Or it gave them such a price competitive advantage. So what happens is this would happen a lot in what we call price point foods. And so what happened is all of a sudden they took that person out, and where you're on a margin of 1.5%, those products are for shelf space, to fight for shelf space. If all of a sudden I can take a person out of that per shift, that product can be a little bit more competitive. Mm-hmm. So now what that means is now all these other companies are buying more of it. Then that's a transition product to say, hey, check out this product line I have. And then next thing you know, a new product line's created. And it grows that way too.
Yeah.
And so we saw the profitability of those companies increase. We saw the average wage of the worker go up. We saw the average retention rate of the company increase. And we loved it. And it was great. We did a long-term analysis the last 3 years I owned Quest. We found that if they were to automate 22 to 30% of the tasks in a facility here in America, we could beat China. And by what we beat China, we would increase the need for our labor force by almost 2/3.
Beat China in what way?
Pricing, speed, and availability.
Okay, so all 3.
Yep. It's incredible. And
why is that not being done, do you think?
Because of the capital investment. We're really weird. This is what's weird about ROI.
I do agree. ROI is in our game too. How people look at things is, to me, I'm like, it doesn't make sense.
No.
There's so many deals. I'm getting to the point now where I can do some of these deals by myself, right?
Yeah.
Even some of the larger ones. But there's been deals the last 3 or 4 years. I'm like, why are we not doing this deal? But I couldn't raise the money for it because of a shorter term metric.
Yeah.
Or a ROI metric or whatever. And even if it was a longer term ROI, how they looked at it, I'm like, but it just doesn't make sense. But
I'm the kind of guy, if you gave me $1 today and 3 years later you said I could have $1 every day, sure, I'd wait. But we don't look at it that way with VC. We don't look at it. It's such a weird.
So I don't know if is that where you're going to just go with that, or did I? Because I cut you off kind of. But
no, that's where I was going to go with it.
All right.
It's weird to me, the way we look at ROI, right? And even yesterday I talked with another customer, and they kind of came to a realization we were going to meet their ROI. What was weird is it was double the amount of equipment that they thought they would need, but yet it was still under a 2-year ROI.
Right.
And their only requisite for the project was get it done faster than a human and under a 2-year ROI, which I did do. And then you're like, But yet I had another talk with a customer yesterday, same exact thing almost, totally different equipment. And he totally gets it. He's like, yeah, that's great. Under year 2, yeah, so what? We just got to think about it a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so there's just some weirdness in that, especially, and VC has changed, right?
So it's not a government thing necessarily. It's more of the capitalist portion.
Yeah.
Of the capitalists looking at it and not making sense of it necessarily, or can't wrap their head around that ROI. Or?
I think it's part of it. Part of it is that we have such a traditional model, right? You go into recession, people want a little bit faster ROI. You come out of recession, they're willing to expand the ROI. It's an arbitrary number.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what had happened is when we got into that part of the labor crisis, there were literally companies calling us saying, I don't care what the ROI is. The problem is if I don't have people, I have no business. Mm-hmm. That's a problem, right? And so you don't take advantage of them at that, but what you do say is I'll help you out. Just keep remembering me,
right.
Let's keep going back. That's weird when you have that happen and people are like, well, how can someone say that? Well, it's easy because if I have one product line I can't supply, we're so interdependent as a company that I'll lose all the other product lines. So instead of shutting down my facility, I'm willing to pay whatever it takes to keep it open because at least I can pay bills.
What was the point in that first business? Are you able to share what your revenue was when you sold the business or not?
Got to think here. Can I yet? I can give you a ballpark.
Yeah, ballpark. What was the ballpark?
We were about 33 million.
And revenue, annual revenue. So what was, there's obviously people that listen and like, whoa, I'd love to do a business like that, right? What was a big pivotal moment in your company where you're like, maybe you were really stuck, couldn't figure something out, and then you figured it out? And how'd you kind of get through that moment? Obviously, that
happens a lot.
Right, but I mean, was there one pivotal moment where you were like, man, we're really stuck here? Or it could be too, like, when was the first time maybe you hit this is maybe a better way to phrase it. When was the first time you hit like a ceiling, a glass ceiling, and what'd you do to get through that?
I think we hit glass ceilings all the time. If I'm going to be honest.
100%, I agree.
Right? But so there's a few
things.
But
for me, right? Like there's along the way there's always these glass ceilings, but I can think of two really, really big ones for me. And for me, it was, I had to make two key hires. Otherwise, we just weren't going to be able to grow anymore. Okay. And I wouldn't let go. So like, there's these things all the time, but like if I had to look back, it was the two really pivotal things.
Okay. One was,
and your answer could be different if we talked about this again, a week from now, or whatever.
I think one was what I shared earlier when I was sick, we didn't know what was going on long before cancer. Right?
Yeah.
That glass ceiling was me realizing like our company's not growing because I'm not empowering. And the glass ceiling next on that was I knew it would cost me some money because there'd be mistakes. I didn't realize how much it would cost me.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I never took a paycheck from Quest. In fact, I was the lowest paid employee at Quest until my last 7 years. Mm-hmm. And so that was one glass ceiling was, okay, how do we empower the team? And next is how do I do it okay? So I got super depressed when we did that.
Yeah, I've been there.
Super depressed.
You're to the point where like, man, I got to get this off my plate. And then all of a sudden, like, no one needs you for a little while.
Right?
we were just talking about this.
So, when you have that, you're like, oh, and I got super depressed and I was battling and sometimes I'd be miserable. And they called me the crow.
You try to make yourself a little more busier than you need to be.
Yeah.
What really
I got to come in and poop over everything and leave.
Yeah, I've done that.
It was all, and then after a while, once I got control of that, but that was soul searching for me. Like, where's my identity?
Yeah.
And my identity was too rooted in what I did, not who God says I am. And that was a really good process for me because, again, I think all these things led up to why I was able to handle cancer so well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that was one. The second glass ceiling was I hired salespeople and underestimated. So I remember one of my largest customers in the end, he had told me, he says, Don, can I tell you something when I was hiring sales guys? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're the worst salesman I've ever met. And I'm like, what? I said, but I've sold a ton of robots to you guys. He's like, yeah. He says, but you're the worst salesman ever. He says, let me tell you why. I'm like, why? He's like, you're too honest. You're way too passionate. And you know way too much about your product. He says, that first meeting we had, we're in the, we're in a boardroom. And he's the owner of this multi-billion-dollar company. And I'm over there and I'm going on about my team, what we've created, why we're a better value than everybody else. I talk with my hands, so when I get really excited, it's big. And he said, after you left, he said, you left the room, and I looked at everybody, and I go, I don't know what the F he was talking about, but I want 3 of them. Like, he was so excited. Can you imagine doing work with a company like this? I want 3 of them. Get me 3 of them. And the next thing you know, I think they bought like 30 of them from us, right? But that was the glass ceiling in that part was the reason why he said that to me was I was hiring a sales team, and he knew I wasn't hiring it right. I was looking for seasoned salespeople. Mm-hmm. And the glass ceiling I met through that is I hired these people. I had 3 salesmen that in 18 months sold nothing. Which it takes time for a salesman to come on board.
That's crazy, yeah.
But our product spoke for itself. I mean, my people were brilliant.
So you started this by saying you overestimate how much sales we're going to do?
No, I overestimated the fact that they'd even sell anything.
Yeah, gotcha.
I thought they would.
Yeah.
So here we were. This is like 4 years before we sold. Now, mind you, I never planned on selling. We're sitting down, and I had put together a board of advisors, and I would meet with them once a quarter. And we're all talking, and we have no work because the whole team is like, you're not going out on the road. we're going to see how this works. Well, then it was getting bad. And then they're kind of like, maybe you should go out on the road.
18 months, you said?
And for a company our size and how we worked on pretty tight profit margins.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I sat down with him, and I remember Tim and Matt were like, so you mean to tell me no one's working? They're all painting, they're all cleaning, they're all sweeping, you're working on some internal programming. Yeah. What about your list? I'm like, yeah, my R&D list. They're like, yeah. I said, but I got to wait until we get sales in so we can fund it. They're like, how long until you're out of money? And I said, well, I got about 12 weeks. And they're like, think about that for a moment. You guys think that I should go off their R&D list now. They're like, listen, double down. So here I was against this girl, wondering how we're going to be in business in 12 weeks. And here all of a sudden I'm looking at like this glass ceiling. The only way to solve it is to believe. And so what we did is I always had this running list of 20 things I wanted to invent. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
So what I had always this running listing of 20 things I always wanted to invent all the time. We never did one patent. Before Elon Musk, there was Don Wickstrom.
Yeah.
Who said, if we're not evolving fast enough, then we shouldn't be in business.
Right.
And so we went out, we developed 6 new products in 12 weeks. And we got about 2 weeks away from like, we were running them off, we're working on them, and the team it was nuts. The team rallied.
When you say developed in your world, does that mean they were done and ready? Like you made a prototype?
I had them all the prototypes rocking.
Yeah, okay.
And we developed these 6 different products and 3 different machines, all right? And we're nearing the end, and I'm seeing that we're there. We're on the horizon. We got videos. I think you came and did some stuff on some of the other stuff, later stuff. And I said, I'm going to hit the road. So I fired the sales group, and I said, I'll be back. And Mary pulls me into the office, and she says, I don't want to put pressure on you that you don't need. But she says, we just pulled the last of our revolving loan. We have no money in the bank account, and we can cover payroll one more time. And so me, her, and
2 weeks.
Yeah, and me, her, and the other lady that worked for me, and I said, it's going to be all right. And I said, it's just going to be old school. And what I meant by that is I used to go out, sell a bunch of stuff, and I'd stay in the shop for a while, and then go out, because I used to do project management and everything. So we prayed, and I hit the road. And went, and I started showing videos, and this stuff was cool. I mean, it was awesome stuff. And the team had just done a remarkable job taking an idea and making it work. And all of a sudden, I go to first place, and it's like, PO. Go to the next place, PO. And then you're kind of like, okay, capacity's filled up. So the third customer, I'm like, listen, if you want this to happen, not only you got PO, but the first person, I kept telling them, first person with a down payment check, you get first in the pipeline, not PO number.
Yeah.
So I get there, and all of a sudden I call Mary, I said, and the whole executive team's in a room, you know, because we were doing our Friday morning checkup. And they're like, hey, Don, how's it going? I'm like, man, you guys killed it. You know, they want to know what people, they didn't care about the money, honestly. They want to know what people saw of the equipment. Yeah. And I'm like, you can't even believe the reception.
Yeah.
And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it's great. And I'm like, I've made some sales. I said, Mary will start filling you guys in and everything else. Well, I got a call on Monday, and Mary's like, everybody's freaking out. How are we going to build all this? And then I started on the East Coast, went all the way across, made it to the West Coast, and then did my largest sale at the West Coast. So that was a big lesson.
I would say that's pretty pivotal. And I mean, it's another really good lesson of, I mean, we've talked how many times you went into a lot more detail there, what it means to go to zero in your bank account.
That was,
I mean, but that's what you go through. You go through that.
I told everybody after it happened, like the executive team obviously knew, you know, because we were transparent on our finances. That was something I never did my whole life until we started the senior management team. And then I did. The first time I showed them finances, my senior management team, 2 of them cried. And they said, you killed yourself for this? And I said, man, we're all employed, aren't we? And they swore they would make me money. I remember that. We're going to make you money. But they felt horrible because they honestly thought I was just killing it. Yeah. Making all this money, you know?
They saw it.
And it's not that I had an extravagant lifestyle. It was just mentality, right?
Yeah.
So what's obviously you're not selling forever. So you hired a couple of sales guys.
Yeah.
None of it worked. You went out, sold everything. Then what as far as your sales? How did you hire that next group? So
one is I already had salesmen working for me. I didn't realize it. Our technicians. They're the guys at the customer all the time. Here's the bad thing. We built really good equipment, so like they weren't there except for preventive maintenance. So they're not in front of the customers often. But what we did find out is, well, in preventive maintenance, it was a great time to be like, hey, have you guys had any problems? No, they've been great. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, you know. And then you start talking. Well, they would start selling stuff.
Yeah.
So what we did is we started educating them on what was coming in the pipeline. We weren't always good at telling them, like, here's the new technology. Started exposing them to it. They would always know it once it hit the floor. Got them ahead of the 8 ball.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you had people selling from the technician level, programming level. And then the next hire I made was one of my best vendors. He was, he helped me grow. He was a great man. Probably my favorite salesman I ever hired. And his name's Brian Coiler. I don't have a problem telling you his name at all. And I hired him right before I got the cancer diagnosis. And he had always been there supporting me. He had always went above and beyond. He was a great salesman, but he's enthusiastic. Mm-hmm. And what I started looking for was hiring people that got excited about the same way I hired everybody else. I would never hire an engineer that wasn't excited about what we did in the job interview. Mm-hmm. I did that with the salesman this time. I didn't care about their pedigree. And so Brian had a great pedigree, thank God, and we got him in. And so that's how we started hiring salesmen. And that worked out a lot better. Now, ironically, I did tell Brian, I'm like, dude, it's going to take you a while to sell something. And I said, part of it is you care too much. I said, people can smell the desperation. I don't know how. Yeah. It just, but once you get that first sale, though, all of a sudden it's easy. And sure enough, he did. And after I sold Quest, you know, Bill Weichman went on, and then he left. And I think I talked to Brian, and like, he is killing it. You know, he's been at this new place for about 3 years, and he's killing it. But he's such a kind man. Ironically, I was on an airplane ride. He had been working for the company he's working for. And I sat down next to the guy, and I noticed the logo. I'm like, hey, I got a friend that works for you guys. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I said he was the best salesman I ever hired. He said, really? I said, yeah, man, I love that guy. I said, I'd give him my pocketbook, and I could trust him with it. I said, I love the guy. And I said, he's passionate. I said, you know, and he's just the guy. He's going to take time to build relationships. But once he builds those, they know he's genuine. He's just a genuine guy. And I said, what will happen is he has their trust, and those customers will be loyal till the day is long.
Yeah.
Well, here come find out was his boss.
Small world.
It's such a small world. But, I mean, and Brian's killing it. I mean, he's just doing a good job. But I think that's what I learned.
A lot of people I work with, it's interesting that those became your best salespeople. A lot of the guys that I work with, you know, wherever they're at in their journey, and if they're looking to hire for a new role, I'm like odds are that person's, if you already got employees, that person's probably already working for you.
Right. Yeah.
There's a good chance that they're already working for you. And you just haven't realized it, or, you know, it hasn't become apparent. But that's interesting that you go to the techs who, you know, they're familiar with your company. They've been working for you for a while. They know the product already, right? Yeah. versus bringing a sales guy that might have sold whatever before. Right. They got this learning curve, and, you know, they might not be as passionate about your company. They might be, you know, whatever. Right. Might be more in it just for the paycheck, right?
Exactly.
Versus your squad that's already rolling with you in the mud.
And I changed the way we paid them. I paid them like everybody else.
True.
So our salesmen they'd get a little piece of the gross sale. Most salesmen in our industry.
This is before, so this is with the guys that were not selling stuff?
No, this is after that. This is what I learned. This is the way I did it, and it was the most successful. So in our industry, normally you just get a piece of the gross, right? Then they're not haggling or anything. Mm-hmm. Problem with that is a guy can go out and sell bad projects. He don't care. When everybody else in the company, the way I did my company is we always did the 3/3 rule. And so a third went back to the employees and bonuses and pay raises. Another third would go back in the company, and another third would go to R&D. Mary and I honestly never took a big cash draw of that company. We just never did. Got my salary. She got her salary. We're always happy. What's interesting is that was based off of our 14 tenants. We had peer reviews, and this is how I consult for other people too. We do these peer reviews. They're raters, and then you have comments. The numbers count. And so let's say it's a 1 to 4 system. Let's say you are peer reviewing Joel and I. Mm-hmm. If you give him a 3 for like reliability, you can't give me a 3.
I love that. Yeah.
Has to be a 3. Has to be a 0.5. Depending on how big your company. Some companies are so big, you got to do 0.05.
Sure. Gotcha. Yeah.
But you have to give a different number. What it does, it stays away from central tendency, and people are ranked.
Yep.
No one's ever exactly the same.
Right.
And so it gets you to think like, okay, who is better here? And then all of a sudden you're like, why do I think he's a little better? And we're like, well, you want to know something? Don shows up 3 minutes early, but I'm telling you right now, Joel shows up 4 minutes early, and he's always got a cup of coffee for me. Right? And so you're going to get the 3.5, not me. And so so we do these peer reviews, and what happens is we got this big, huge thing, and now we're trying to turn it into an app for our customers, because my large customers like, you still do this in Excel? I'm like, yeah. I had one customer, there's no lie, he loved our system. I spent weeks with him. We get done, he's like, Don, we're not going to continue any longer. I'm like, why? He's like, we've got to build an app. We can't do this on Excel sheets. So, but I did have that one customer, 22,000 employees. We did it on Excel sheets.
Wow.
But you rate it, and then what happens is you then rate each department. The manager's review counts for, depending how many people you go, we've got a proven regression for that. But let's say, at minimum, it's going to be 3 times to 4 times everybody else's value. So the manager matters most. Then you plug that in, and then you do standard deviation, curve calculations, all this other stuff, right? 95 percentile. And it rates the whole company on a curve, and the department and the person. Based off of that and that offset, we then look at how many days did you take off? If you didn't take off enough days, it counted against you. If you took off all your vacation, it counted against you. And the reason being is there's all these studies that show the people that don't take all their vacation, leave a little bit behind, do really well, and those who leave some, do that window in between. Those who don't take vacation tend to not do as good.
Yep.
Those who take all their vacation tend to be more negative on the company.
Interesting.
And so we did all these studies. So we made this whole matrix. It's done very numerically, and then you're equated to a year-end bonus. I always tell everybody a pay raise should be a pay raise for setting off economics, because it's not for doing your job well.
Right.
Right. That's what you're hired to do.
You're employed because you're doing your job.
Right.
What the bonus is how well did you do doing your job and making the company profitable? So then everybody's minded. And when we did the culture by the hour, not the dollar, when we do that in companies, what happens is when you start valuing people's time above everything else, efficiency starts picking up. People start looking for more creative members, especially when they realize that they're tied in the profits. And yet what's funny is they won't do it like an employee-owned business. Sometimes we've noticed that those tend to increase revenue not in ways that benefit a customer.
Makes sense.
Because what happens is I'll just bill out a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm at 25 after, I'm just going to put 45 after. Where in this model, if they're servicing the customer better and being more efficient at it, we both benefit.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden we started making money. People are getting good bonuses. They're getting great raises. Everything's going together really well. And so that money that we dipped in our EBITDA, we came back on the other side huge.
Well,
and
yeah,
that's what happens
multiple.
with every company I consult for is you'll tell them, you have to really, you understand your EBITDA is going to take a hit. And you're like, well, yeah, I said your bottom dollar is going to take a hit, your net. They always tell you're in for it until it starts doing it.
Yeah.
And I have a parachute clause. You put me on a retainer, you don't ever get it back. So no matter when you quit in this system, that's my money.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people on the way down they'll quit. Kid you not. But I have never had anybody that's weathered the system where they haven't had an EBITDA and a net profit that's better than when we started. Not one.
How long does that process usually take if they go full cycle with
If they go full cycle with me, it's about 2 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where you really see the first year you can make a lot of gains. But normally here's what happens. This is what's really weird. You go through that model, and so the first people I meet with is the senior executive team or their senior managers, right? I can typically tell by the end of the meeting who's going to quit. It's funny how you think you can have some really loyal people, and when you start talking about this model of transparency, of peer reviews, of valuing your time over money, how many people get nervous about it, and how many will leave?
So how's the manager? It's funny. This conversation is going not where I thought it was going to go. How's the manager? How's the manager?
What are you going to do? I didn't realize how late it was already.
I don't know.
I'm
I'm learning a lot too. Yeah. How's the manager scored? Obviously, I heard so peers. If I heard correctly,
scored,
yeah. But if Joel and I are peers, kind of doing the same thing, I'm rating my other peers.
Yep.
if I've got 4 of them, I get 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
If I give Joel 4 because I love him that much, he gets a 4. I can't give anyone else the 4.
Right.
How is their manager of those 4? How are they getting a rating?
So like, let's say I'm your manager.
Yeah.
I've rated you guys. You guys have rated each other. My manager rates me, or the CEO.
I see.
Sure.
The sheep never judge the shepherd.
Sure.
Right.
Got it. So if the CEO were to have, like 4 VPs underneath that CEO, then again, they got 4.
They got 4.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we always break it down that way. And then what's funny is your manager, you got to remember, as a manager, you're rated against other departments.
So
And
then
that's
how are the departments? So then how are the departments rated?
Same way with the number system of the accumulation of the peer reviews.
So
not
they're
only are
upper
you rating
leadership.
your peers, you're rating your department, so to speak.
So when I say rating peers, it's not just the peers in my department.
No, it might be someone from another department. That it's whoever you work with on a regular basis.
Got it.
So let's say you have,
Got it. I didn't realize it was okay.
Yeah, so we go it's always interdepartment because you work at some level.
Yeah.
It may not be a lot,
Yeah.
but you work at so they get the peers. So it's some work, but the rater sheet's pretty quick, and we have definitions. So everything on the rater sheet has definitions, so everybody understands the definition of it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Every time we release it. So you might have 14 tenants, but on like a half year, so depending how often you want to do bonuses and check up, like I tell everybody, a yearly review sounds great, but why wait a year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the number 2 is, I used to tell everybody, like, in our company, if anybody averaged less than like a 2, you were gone. And the way you were gone in my
Average
company,
less than a 2 over how long of a time, and being rated how many times?
in 2 successive times.
2 successives. Gotcha.
Because why are you there?
Got it.
We are not a mediocre company.
Right.
And what I've learned is you don't have to have a skill set to be a great employee.
Yeah.
You have to be a great employee. That's it.
Well, you knew that from your internship you got.
Yeah, that's amen to that, man. So what's cool about it is as these people rate their own peers and others, there's a development of rating your department.
Sure.
And then that's compared to each other. And so then also there's formulas we have that show the tendency, and then it goes from the top down. Like, okay, if you ranked your manager like this, but everybody else ranked the department like this, then there's a skew number there. Like, hey, this is how skewed it is. If you see that consistently across the CEO who rated all his presidents or VPs, then you understand it's them. There's other thought here than just, but you have to make the numbers count. Mm-hmm. And then that way and part of the reason why I was so diligent it took me a few years to get it right, but we were reviewing every quarter at this time to try to get it right, is I never wanted to be accused of favoritism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it removed me out of the equation, and it became a numbers thing where we go back and say, listen, and we always made people do comments at the end. And then the other thing you do is the next time you say, okay, what's 2 areas they can improve on? So those 2 numbers highlight on their review. And then what are 2 things they improve on? What are 2 things they excel on? So not only do you get the review, but you get to look at it and say, hey, everybody, these are the things, this is a majority of people think I could improve on this, and a majority of people think I do great on this.
Yeah.
And then you sit down, you've got numbers, data, and then you get to tell them how they did against the company, how their department did against the other department. And then you get to say, but what's cool is that directly ties in how much of the money that we're going to allocate towards bonuses go to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's sweet.
And then what you do is you rate the whole thing on a company curve.
Yeah.
And the reason why we like that is like, hey, if you're on the fringe, you're not going to get much. But if you're starting to meet the company average for the bell curve, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Owners, this is the other thing I find really funny. How many owners are afraid to give up some of their profit?
A lot.
It's mind-boggling to me. And I'm like, why? Like, I don't like the persona that has been pushed, especially from the left, of what business owners are. Listen, most business owners I run across are not money-greedy, hungry animals. And we do recognize that we have employees. The difference is that we've shared the risk. We've took the brunt of the risk. If you don't want to work for someone and you think you're owed something, then go start your own business. Mm-hmm. No one's. That's the wonderful thing about the capitalism environment we live in. Go start your business. What I love are entrepreneurs. Those are my favorite.
You talk about that all the time.
Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
I love them because they're going to work, but they're going to work for your company as hard as it's for yours, but they're smart enough to know, and they're wise enough to know what we don't know. It's stupid knowing your own business. I have friends that would do great in business, but they understand, like, I don't want a life like that.
Right.
You can go home and worry about the numbers. I'm going to go sleep.
Yeah.
And I love that. And so I think, like, when we look at this whole rating system brings that all into reflection and says, okay. And what it does is everything, then on top of that, we're matrixing what all their time is spent. So what we call our Q timer tracks everything they do. So it's not tracked by your department, it's tracked by the task you're doing. So let's say 1 minute you're working for accounting, helping them fill out some billing issues. Okay, you're going to be in accounting billing. And then you go over to the other side of the building.
How do you actually get to the point where you're doing that with your time?
On the phone. What do you mean, cross-functioning?
Well, I mean, how do you know that? Though I always question, who's logging that time? The actual person that's doing the work.
Person that does it.
Yeah.
And the reason why they value that is they understand it gets tied in with them at the end of the year.
Right.
And so, and then we have ways to check that. Yeah. Like we could tell, like, when two people were in the same room and check. Oh, well, that's a problem. But what they do is they fill it, and we made it where it was a quick app where it took you 5 to 15 seconds putting your time. That's it.
Yeah.
You had no timesheets anymore.
Yeah.
All on your phone. And so what they would do is like my guys, they would 1 minute they'd be working for mechanical engineering, the next minute they might do electrical assembly.
Yeah.
Most traditional companies would just be like, well, I'm billing all for the mechanical engineering department. That's where he's based at. Well, no. I mean, in your business, not everybody's doing the same thing every day. Now you can find out where our inefficient. Why are we spending so much time on? Yeah, we only have 3 electrical guys, but why do we have 4 mechanical guys working for electrical?
That makes sense. Yeah.
We would have never known that before.
Sure.
And so I remember we had this standard cell. The first time we built it, we had 2,600 hours in it. Second one we built, we had 1,600 hours in it. And we were so happy we got down to that. Well, I ran all the analytics on everything. I said, hey, guys, I think one day, within 2 years, we could be down to 400 hours. And, oh, no. I said, I promise you we'll be down to 800 in a couple months. Sure enough, 2 months later, we're at 800 hours for that system. By the way, we're one of the fastest robotic integrators in the world. We could build cells faster than anybody else. A great streamlined team because of all this. And we were fully customized. Most of our cells were customized.
When you say that we were the fastest, that was Quest? Or?
Yeah, Quest.
Okay, got it.
And we're still, I mean, my new company with the ag robotics, we're quick too. I mean, yesterday we got a full concept system done. I mean, we just work. We get it done, we put in the hours. But because of that, attention to wanting to be efficient, and when you have to be on your timer all the time, you start to question your time.
Right.
And we found stupid things out, like the average person at our company that time, when they went to the bathroom, phones were really popular, smartphone got new, Instagram was brand new, Facebook was gaining, was pretty popular.
Breaks increased.
The bathroom breaks increased, average of 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Would have never thought. What happens is you start reading something, you get caught on it.
Yeah.
And half the time they're probably reading something about the job. So we did something really stupid. We made it down to one single stall. The other toilet was exposed in the urinal. And we put a door opener with no lock, like a restaurant bathroom.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're down to 8 minutes.
Yeah.
The guys and gals just picked up, 32 minutes of efficiency.
How are you getting people to how's the compliance work with that?
They self-check each other.
Everyone's time's open for everybody to see.
Well, the manager are able to see everybody's, but they self-check each other, because if you're seeing your hours on your department go up, you're going to look at your ledger and say, why is it up? Wait, why is this person on my time? He didn't spend 3 hours in my department, because it matters to you. Because that time, how efficient you are with your time, what the quoted time was with the actual time, or if your repetitive time, it starts to affect you. It's a great... Again, the word accountability we hate, but it's such a beautiful thing when you live in transparency and accountability.
Yeah. No, transparency is something that we talk about here a lot too. That's what we're trying to get to, is where everybody, and we're working in that direction where everyone's ranked with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's transparent, and ideally, it's like you said, if you're going to be a 2, go. And the crazy thing about that is, like, when you start to think about that, it's like that person that fills that seat, they're either going to be a 2 or they're going to push someone else to be a 2.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I was sitting here thinking about as you, like, I'm like, man, it's crazy.
Everybody, and it's the other cool thing about it is I always felt like everybody wanted everybody to do well. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there was contention.
But that goes back to the culture.
Right.
I think, right? When you get the right people, like, a bunch of us were talking about this. When you get the right people, I think that's one of the things for me. I don't know if I shared this on the podcast before I was talking to. One of the other things that really excites me about our business right now is I got there's 4 of our executive staff that they're getting equity now in our deals. Right. So like and I've told them it's re-energized me a little bit. Not that I was ever like complacent but I'm like, okay, like I see how hard they work. Right. And I'm like, and there's a lot of big changes we want to make here. But now I'm like, guys, you realize now I'm going to be even harder on you.
Yeah.
Because you now have me excited to see like your guys' net worth go up and get compensated from that. I love environments where people are just like supporting each other. Mm-hmm. I can't stand the other environment.
Right.
Can't stand it.
And in my conference room, Joel had seen it back at Quest, which it's now at Axel.
Did you get it moved over?
Yeah, we did.
That's cool.
The old plant manager got rid of it. Anyways, I had a custom table made.
Yeah.
And it looked like a boat. It was a long conference table. It was a boat style, and on the edge was blonde wood. And the whole center of it was made with blue tinted individual planks, all going the same direction. Mm-hmm. And on the base legs were robots, and then inlaid in it was gears. Okay, and it was 3 gears on each side. And when it got done, I sat down with the senior management team and I said, "Listen," I said, "this table is very intentional." I said, "Number one is, it's a boat. When we sit at this table, we all remember we're in the same boat. Number 2 is look at the individual planks. While everything is blue to stand for Quest, that we're working in the same boat for the same company, notice that all the planks go in the same direction, but the grains are all different. That represents you guys. That we're all unique, but when we align and we all point in the same direction, we can see our uniqueness, but yet we're all together in harmony. Mm-hmm. And we're rowing in the same direction." I said, "You'll also notice that the perimeter of the boat is blonde. And that is to remember that there is a Savior, there is a God that protects us and washes us clean. And the 3 gears are for innovation. But the number 3 is significant because of God, the Father, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus. And we need all 3 if we're going to do any good at running a business." And that was very intentional to us. And I loved it because we'd sit down. Now, we allowed the senior management team, sometimes you got in each other's face, right? But we always said, number 1, never personal. Number 2, you can never accuse someone of making you feel a certain way. You can only say, "I feel," because that's the truth. I don't know how you meant to make me feel.
Right, yeah.
And number 3 is, if we raise our voices, we act in the same kind, the amount of grace and forgiveness and mercy we need to have. We always said there should be nothing in business that if we're trying to look at the cross and we're trying to do business, there should be no dispute in business that should corrupt our friendship. If we're acting in contentment and godliness. I had a experience with my company. So I had the largest contract ever in my company's history. It was a $25 million single PO. We started it. They were late on their down payment. They gave me a down payment. We started the work. It was a lot of robots, a lot of cool. It was really cool. And we had just moved from a Quonset hut into a newer building. We renovated it. We made it into what we needed to. We're working. They're late on the check. Well, back then, resin companies would often get a kickback check from like BASF or somebody. And they kept telling me, "Well, that check's late." Now, mind you, they would use 5 rail cars of plastic in a shift. So that check would probably be pretty sizable. So I kept working because I wanted to make sure I met my deadlines. Hired employees, everything else. And then about a month and a half into the project, still not paid. Go down there. They promised me they're going to pay next week. The plant manager calls me on the Monday and says, "Don, stop working." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Stop working. They just hauled the CFO out in handcuffs." And I'm like, "What?" And I've got 5 employees now. I'm big time. We were looking to hire like many more. And I'm like, "All right." So I stopped working. And then the project manager calls me 2 days later and says, "Listen, we're filing bankruptcy, I found out." And I'm like, "Oh no." And he's like, "Whatever you do, just don't work. Try to figure things out." I'm freaking out. And I won't ever forget this. I was freaking out. Now, we had just moved into this building. 4 months before this PO even came up, we just moved into our first house. Oldest house in Monroe. Old house, but it was a house. And my wife didn't like it. And then we moved in this building, for this, because we were growing. And now I have no idea. So I'm crying, I'm upset. And I called Jan, the lady I was telling you about. And I'm on the phone. I'm like, Jan, you're my banker. I'm worried. And I'm crying and carrying on and acting like a big baby, right? And she's like, Don, shut up. Just shut up for a second. I'm like, all right. She's like, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, no, it's not. She's like, yes, it's going to be okay. She says, suck it up. Get back to work. And keep doing what you're doing. She's like, listen, you pay all your vendors early. That's going to mean something to them. She says, everybody's going to work with you. Don't worry about it. And so I was looking at it. I'm like, man, we just didn't have enough work at the time. And I was talking to some employees about like, hey, would you guys be okay with a rolling layoff? What's interesting, there was only 2 employees that weren't okay with it. I laid nobody off. I'm telling you, man, it was by a miracle God. Somehow we weathered that storm. I don't even know how. But we did it. And the team did a good job. What's funny is those 2 guys that wouldn't do it, everybody else agreed to it. They were all about trying to make things go. A couple years later, we grew again. We kept going. Both those gentlemen, I was driving to a customer's and just, a lot of times when I drive, I pray. And I felt like God told me, like, you need to check your server. And I'm like, so I called the home office and said, hey, Ashley, can you check the server activity? She's like, why? I said, I don't know. I just felt like praying, like that was, like God spoke that in my head or mind. And she's like, oh, well, the activity's pretty high today. I'm like, well, who's working? There shouldn't be a whole lot of people there. And she told me, and I'm like, is it uploads or downloads? She's like, oh, no, it's all uploading off the server. I'm like, pull the plug. She's like, what? I said, don't even shut it down. Just pull the plug right now. So I called Chris Schilling. And I explained to him, I said, man, something's going on here. I said, and I explained to him, he's like, we can help. So he helped. Those 2 guys were downloading my server, selling all our trade secrets, because I'm big on trade secrets, not patents, but trade secrets, to a competitor, and then went and worked for them. Ironically, just like 2 years before this, I gave what little savings I had saved up to one of those young men to help him pay off debt. I felt so betrayed.
Yeah.
And for a couple years, I trusted nobody.
Yeah.
And then finally, God got a hold of me and said, listen, you can't live like this. You have to forgive. And I did. I forgave him, and I'm good. Ironically, that company never sold a robot.
Well, God works in funny ways.
He does. But, I think in all that we learn lessons, right? And we move on. But not everything goes as we thought. But if you surround yourself with good people, my uncle told me when I first started, hire people that are smarter than you to where they intimidate you.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And some of my people, I'm not going to lie to you, there's 2 guys I hired, 3 guys, but 2 of them I hired without even asking them a question about anything to do with business. I hired Garrett Crandall. He's still an engineering manager. He's one of the VPs at Quest still, one of the most brilliant engineers I know, one of the most brilliant. I knew he had left MIT with a 4.0. And he was working on like $100 million yachts, designing those and stuff. And he came in the door, and I saw him light up when he saw the robotics. And Garrett has these big, huge, he's just a big man. And he's got these baby blue eyes, these gorgeous little baby blue eyes that his wife fell in love with. They met at my work, and they're married. I hired him in 15 seconds in my mind. I remember leaning against one of the toolboxes, and we were talking, and he just kept looking at the robots and was excited. And I just, in my mind, I'm like, I'm hiring this guy. He had to interview with my engineering manager at that time. Interview with him, he came back, he's like, I don't want to hire that guy. And I said, too bad you're hiring him. And I normally didn't do that. I let them do it. I said, you got to hire that. And I said, if you don't hire him, I'll put him on something. And a year later, Garrett was thrown in the fire. 6 months after that, he became my engineering manager. The reason why I say this is we came in a really hard time after that with a project we did for a customer, and it was just going sideways. Now, we had a money-back guarantee. Never bought back a cell. but was going sideways and just wasn't good. Everybody was on high tensions. We're all cranky with each other. And typically when things like that happen at Quest, you'd lose somebody. Someone would just get burnt out and leave. And I was worried that was going to happen here. And I had some of my veterans with me and everything else. We're trying to figure this out. And Garrett walked in and he got spicy with me. And next thing I know, we're not behaving very well. We're yelling at each other. And all of a sudden he says, and I was starting to have that sickness when I was in the wheelchair, but I wasn't telling anybody. And he says, "That's it, you and me by the pallet rack." I'm like, this boy's going to kill me. I mean, Garrett could go like this and kill you, right? And he calls me back there, and he's like, and this is, like I said, about 2.5 years after this whole betrayal thing. And he looks at me and says, "I don't know what the blank your problem is or what you're thinking or anything else." He's like, "None of us want to be in this situation, but we're here fighting right alongside with you because we care." He said, "I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to have disagreements, but it's not going to change the fact that we're going to be friends for life. If we both keep our eyes on Jesus Christ, we're going to be just fine." He says, "We both want the same thing. We just may have different avenues. Now get over here and give me an effing hug." And he just grabbed me and hugged me. And I cried like a baby. And that guy changed my life as a boss.
Yeah.
Because that was the first man who ever, I remember what else he said. I forgot. He said, "I don't know what those guys did before I came, but you didn't deserve that." That was the first time I heard that. You didn't deserve that. And he says, "But we're here." And he says, "I'll be right with you the whole time." And Garrett was. And that like changed. I was like, I went from thinking I was going to be killed to this guy holding me. I was just crying. I just had never, here was someone who like, here's a guy who was willing to fight with me. You know, it's one thing to fight for somebody.
Right.
It's another thing to fight with somebody. Like, I love you enough to fight for you, but I'll love you enough to fight with you, so to speak. And he did that. And Garrett will always have, I mean, we talk all the time, but he's just a special dude, you know, and that was a big lesson. That was a big lesson for me.
So it's stories like that I was trying to get out of you with the glass ceiling, and maybe the glass ceiling not the way to think about it. But
Sure.
I mean, there's every single day, every single week, every single month, there's all these things, but there's so many though that you also forget of, like hard times or because they're, you know, but like you have so many things, so many bigger things too that you just overcome. And I just wanted you to point out some of those because it's important. I mean, it's important to realize that like this is what people are going to go through, and there's other people are going to watch this that man, I'm going through that. I went through that. Everybody goes through it. There's a lot of people that share just the good things on Instagram. Like that's not how it always is.
Right.
Like you're going to have to fight through some stuff in business and life and everything. So I love hearing those stories, and I love hearing all that stuff. I know, like, I would love to have you on again at some point. I don't want to keep because
I took too much time. I apologize.
No. All that stuff was great. I think I in my mind, this whole thing, I wanted to go through more of the documentary and break out a little bit more of the cancer stuff and break out some more of that stuff. This was phenomenal. I am a huge fan of yours. Like I respect you a ton just from hearing your story, what you've done. What you've overcome, the way you think about things. I know somewhere in there you said you dropped some line saying I'm not very smart or something like that. I don't know. You come off pretty smart
I'm
to
not.
me.
I have a lot of people smart around me, and that helps.
It does. It helps a lot.
Joel
But
sees
man,
the stupid stuff I've done.
But that's also your brilliance.
man,
Well, I don't know if that's brilliance, but I think here's the other thing. I love to see people succeed.
Yeah.
yeah,
I really do. I love.
yeah.
And the world's not like that. It's
And even
so sad.
so many people that start their own business or and mean good, they have a hard time getting there sometimes because they think it's going to take away from them and what they can achieve, especially if it's the people that are closest to them, who they work with, a peer, whatever it is. But once you get to the other side of that though, and you realize that you truly get behind someone else and want them to succeed, more is going to come to you from that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you even said that. You said you'd be amazed at how many people have money and also want to see you succeed. That's so true. And sometimes they want you to succeed because hopefully you'll make some money. What I love are the people that want to see you succeed have nothing to benefit.
Which there's plenty of them out there. There's so many of them out there. It's crazy. I used to struggle with it a little bit in football. I'd be like, oh, the backup running back, he's doing pretty good. I'd be like, I was happy for the team, obviously, but like there'd be times I'd be down about it too. The moment my mind flipped on it, I'm like, oh, this is it. It's both of us, like both of us. And then things change. Like, so I mean, when I was younger, again, like high school, some of that stuff would happen. So sports really taught me some of that stuff too. But like when you can get behind other people, rally around other people, you're going to get out. I mean, it's like anything else. You're going to get out of the world, and the world's going to give you what you're putting into it. You know? And if you're hoping for someone else's downfall, you're probably going to have a little bit of a downfall, be tripping a lot.
Right.
But if you're putting out there like, man, I want this guy to succeed, and truly, genuinely want that person to succeed, like you're going to have more success come from that.
Right.
I'm a firm believer of it. But you also can't go into it. It's got to be genuine. It's got to be genuine.
Oh, 100%.
You can't just go into it thinking, oh, I want you to be successful, because now something's going to come to me. Or you can't just go and, give something to somebody and expect something in return. It's got to be genuine, because that's how you truly feel. But like when you get to that position, it can be really eye opening when that changes and some of that stuff starts to come back around to you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the same thing when you go broke in your bank, like it's going to come back.
Yeah.
It'll come back because you're going after something that you're going to believe in. Right.
And I think,
and if it doesn't come back on that one, it's, well, what did you learn now that it'll come back on the next one times 3?
right.
Times 5.
It's never a failure unless you make that your final chapter. It's like I said, we've learned so much from failing.
I mean, failing another way, like if you're an investor, right, and things are going down, and if you're not looking at selling anytime, you want it, and if you're a buyer, you want it to go down.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can pick up more.
Yep.
Right. So when you look at yourself as like, man, I really believe in this. Like, no, like it's kind of the same. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but
Well, I was going to make a joke, but never mind.
you can make the joke. You can make the joke.
No, I realize it was a little not colorful. I'll tell you guys when we're out there. But no, you're right. I mean, I think in that, the other thing is when again, I don't know how people run businesses without a faith. I really don't, because I couldn't do it. I'm just not that smart, and I'm not that resilient, and I'm not that strong. I think what helped me is knowing that this is where God had me. I don't know that he ever said I would succeed.
Sure.
I don't feel like he ever told me that. And I think when you come from the background I had, so my first job was at 10 years old. I was milking cows, and I bought my first 2 cars at 10 and a half. It's those things that, like you must have been really, no, my dad was told by the teachers when they told my mom and dad I was retarded when I was younger, he better know how to work with his hands. Well, if you're going to tell my dad made sure I could work with my hands. Right. The bad news about that is when I invented stuff, like I can remember I invented, we lived up on top of a building, second story, and I had to walk down the trash like 68 or 100 steps or something, right? And I hated doing it. So I invented this whole thing with like odds and ends I found in the dumpsters and my sister's little shopping cart for her dolls. That I could put the garbage in there and it would go down and wind up a counterweight, and then it would go out to the edge of the alley and it would click the back end of the axle and it would dump the trash right there, because we did bags. Yeah. And then it would reel itself up. I worked on this thing for weeks. We get it together. I get it together. And I'm going to show everybody. I showed my mom. My mom was always kind of good. She kind of, I think probably a little bit more my dad, appreciated some of my early inventions. Mm-hmm. My dad saw it. It ran everything else. He whooped my butt and told me stop being lazy. Take it down. Mm-hmm. He was worried, right? But yet this is the very man. He's the only reason I ended up at college. I had went and raced I told him I was going camping. I drove to South Carolina, tried out for an amateur race team. The deal was you could try out for the amateur race team. If you got the seat, you then worked for them and was a mechanic, and then you helped with their pro league team. I go there and never raced circle track in my life. Drive through the night, get there. We go through the morning class. They get you in a car. You go out. Everybody takes turns, right? And you get like 3 tries. Fastest dude there. Never raced before. They offer me the contract. So now I got to come home and tell mom and dad. Me and dad sit down. I already graduated high school. I had a goal, race car driver and mechanic. That's all I wanted to be. And my dad said, if you want a family one day, you can't be a racer. And I said, well, I don't like kids. He's like, well, you want to get married? I'm like, 100%. He says, well, kids will come. He says, you can't do that in NASCAR. Back then, you didn't do that. And so he said, he says, listen, don't sign this. Do me a favor. Just wait. And I said, well, I only got 3 weeks to return. He says, all right. He says, just apply to one school. He says, you have enough money saved up for a race car. That would pay for a year of school easy. Just apply one place. And I'm like, no one's going to take me. I mean, this is like a month before Platteville starts. The only reason I picked Platteville, number one, was I just took 6 of the universities, 1 through 6, and I rolled a dice. And it came up to Platteville. So that's why I hate telling this story, because people are like, you're an idiot. This is how I applied for school. You had to list a thing. So I'm going through this list of, start at A and work my way down. I'm like, engineering, that has engine in it. I like that. I thought I was going to be working with engines. Like, I'm thinking engines and choo-choo train, I'm like, this is great. They didn't meet with me in high school in counseling because I wasn't going to college.
Right.
I was from the era where college was bad, right? I mean, tech school or hand trades were bad. They write back and they're like, if you can score so high on the ACT, we'll let you come. So I go to ACT. I won't say what I scored, but it was really, really good. I didn't know it was good. And then they write back and they're like, oh, you get a grant because you were this high on the ACT. So I went to school. But my dad, who had whooped my butt for innovations, at that moment, I think he started realizing, like, wait, you aren't lazy. Your mind must work in a different way.
Yeah.
And had he not challenged me on that, I would have. So I lost a bet with my dad, and that's how I ended up at college. And so I think there's just moments where, reason why I'm saying any of this is we can never, ever get to a point where we don't appreciate the small moments. That changed.
I noticed something
my
that you
life.
said kind of in the beginning about the you guys lived in the mobile home.
Yeah.
You said I wish I could go back there or something. You
Yeah.
said the thing was the best or whatever.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah.
But that's like, because like once you've kind of, people also don't realize, it's like once you've kind of made the progress, you always do look back like, man, like that was like, because it changed your life somehow. It molded you, whatever, and you'd be like, I'd go back and do that again.
Yeah.
But in that moment,
I wouldn't have.
But in that moment, when you open up the fridge and you have or the freezer and you've got venison, you got 2 pounds of venison, you got the mac and cheese and whatever,
and half a quart of
and
half.
In that moment, you're like, oh my god, this, like, right, like, and now here you are. You're like, but it's all about the journey.
Yeah,
it's all about the journey. It's never, and I think that's also why I'm wired in a way where I'm always like next, because the next thing is just about about the continued journey.
Yeah.
For me, and there's never, to me, it's like there should never really be a finish line.
Right. My wife told me that. She said, "Don't let the goal ever rob you of the joy of the journey." Mm-hmm. And she reminded me a lot of that during cancer. Was like, don't let cancer rob you of this journey. Don't let your insecurities rob you of this journey. Like, be journey based. Because I'm always a goal guy, right? Mm-hmm. And now, people ask, well, what's the goal? I just know I'm living the journey, And so, like, the fact that you say that, I like that. That, like, I'm not gonna. It's just we're gonna continue to look like what's next. And I think it's a fine line, right? Like, this is what's weird, right? What the world wants us to be discontent with are the very things we should be content with.
Yeah.
And the things it wants us to be content with are the very things we shouldn't be content with. Mm-hmm. And I think today we might have dropped a dime second about that. But it's a fine balance, because in that striving, right, the world would tell you, well, it's never good enough, never good enough, never good enough. All of a sudden you start getting a little discontent with the progress you're making. Then what happens? You start getting discontent with other things in life. And then you'll get discontent with relationships in your life.
Yep.
And then you'll get discontent with what God's doing in your life. You'll start blaming him and pull away from him. And then you're just discontent. Mm-hmm. And it's a fine thing. But on the opposite side of it, you could be content with being a bump on a log. You could be content with no progress. And the line is, when is enough accomplishment enough? It's the same when someone hurts, right? Like, I always ask people, like, when we're sitting down and counsel them or whatever, let me ask you, how much hurt does that person need to have for you to forgive them? Just curious. Like, when is it enough? What's the threshold? I'm just curious, because you're withholding that forgiveness. I'm just wondering, what's the equation here? What's the end game? Mm-hmm. And they'll look at you like, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And so, like, the question is, like, how much success is enough where you're content if you're discontent, right?
Yeah, and I think the journey too. It's kind of I hate the whole thing too with how I mean, I was 35, so I'm married. I have 11-year-old who's I call her my daughter. She's my stepdaughter, and then got a 6-month-old, right? So
when's the next one?
But it's like kids, kids. Hopefully soon.
Joel, how many you got?
I'm at 4.
Yeah,
You're 4. And you're at what, 6?
I'm at 5.
You're at 5, okay.
But I think
I knew the daughter-in-law now.
Yeah.
And my daughter, I've known her since she was 5.5-ish, 5.5-ish or whatever. But like kids, I think put that journey part in perspective big time. That's when it really, like, the journey part. I mean, I've always been about the journey more than I think like the average person, but I think that's when I've been even more like just the journey, because I think it puts in perspective how fast things go in life.
You're right.
And so because like when we're younger, how it seems like from 6 years old to 12 years old
was an eternity.
Eternity, right? And now that you're an adult, you see how fast that went. I see how fast that went with my daughter. And so now it's like but then I'll also, like, my son's been born, and it's like trying to every single moment. Like every single moment, trying to be present and trying to enjoy the journey. As frustrated or pissed as I am about something that happened at work,
right?
That's why I can kind of run off my back a little bit. But kids have really put it into perspective. And I think, again, going back to the world, always trying to like have less kids or push, because there's no, it should be both. Mm-hmm. Like, you can have a profession and have kids. Yeah. Like, and I get it for the women. There's physical things and stuff, but like, it doesn't mean just because you have a kid, might you be out of commission for a little bit, 12 weeks if you want to be. I mean, my wife was out for maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks. And again, it doesn't mean she's not enjoying, but she had just opened the second location and had to, get it. Like, you can do it all.
Yep.
You can do it all. Stop listening to the people that say you can't do it all.
Right.
Or try to put limits on you.
Yep.
Or because, again, it's only just this recent generation where like people try to put these limits. It never used to be that way. I mean, think how many kids people were having in the 1900, early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, and like the things that generation still accomplished, right? Yeah. So
it is crazy, and we've lost that value, and I think also what's wrong with encouraging somebody where they're at, like, and what I mean by that is, when you see people go down the career path, like you said, like, you can have more than one kid. You have 2, you can 10, whatever you want to have. Do it. Enjoy life. Whatever you do, enjoy what you're doing and see the blessings in it.
Yeah.
And I think that, like what you said, kids get you to realize gratitude. And Joel, there was a conversation we had when you were recording for us at Quest, and your one daughter was having a problem sleeping, I think it was, right through the night or something. And we were just talking about like, it'd be really nice to have my bed back, I think is what you were saying, or something like that. And I just laughed because my kids weren't quite like that, but now my new, the younger kids are. And I'm like, man, so I think about that often, but also you miss it now, I bet.
Right. Well, I've got the youngest.
That's true.
Who now is back in the bed all the time. So I'm not quite past it yet. But yes.
Was there a gap there where you did?
Oh,
where
for
you
sure.
didn't have it, and you're kind of there's a time I miss it, and even now, like, I see it's happening less, right? And where with the older kids, but I think you enjoy and you have a gratitude when you realize like things are quick.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, how quick life goes. And when I got cancer, I felt like that year was warp speed. Like, it was warp speed. I don't know how to explain it, but it was just like, holy biscuits of stuff happening fast. And since then, it's kind of slowed down a little bit more. But I think in that, gratitude is a huge thing for the journey. My whole cancer battle, and even now we do it to today, some of it. But every morning I wake up, before my feet even hit the floor, I will pray in bed. And it's just thanksgiving for what I have. I thank him for 5 things. It's 5 things. I get out, I do my quiet time. And then what I decided with my family when I got cancer, I said, listen, we are not going to focus on this. That's my job. My job is to fight this battle. You're going to see diets change. You guys are going to have to eat some different things with me. But they had been through that before, just in a different degree. And I said, I'm going to have good days and bad days. But I said, my hope is that you guys forget I have cancer. That's my hope. And every night at the dinner table, what we do is we go around and say one thing we're grateful for, and then what's the funniest thing you've seen all day? That's what we do. And I love it because when you got little kids, you just never know.
You don't know what's going on that month.
But I think it helped me really understand that, like, there's a lot of blessings in life. And success isn't something that should feel like it's a staunch stench of people. Like, the world has really looked down on people. with success, but then you've got the other side of it where people idolize other people that have success. And in that, I think, you know, as you go through, like I've had to figure out who like, what does it mean to be a friend? I'm a horrible at being an available friend.
Yeah.
Because I'm too busy. Like
It's reality.
It's reality. And especially when you got kids. And I envy where I'm at. I'm in a place of envy right now for those families who are like, oh yeah, we had this family over last weekend. How do you find time to have someone, you know, that's what I'm thinking. But so I think through it all, you're trying to transition and just be grateful, not look at what I don't have, but how to be more available. You know, that's kind of my goal for 2025 is to move things in my life where I can be more available and a more available friend.
Yeah.
The good news is like most people that know me, they're super gracious. They're like, yeah, Don's just always been busy. He's that guy.
Yeah.
And they put up with it.
Well, that's how your best, the closest friends, that's how they get it.
Yeah.
Like somehow, some way, maybe they don't get it directly, but they accept it, or
Yeah, that's probably a better way
they're
to put it.
accepting of it.
And
But I think a lot of that comes down to kind of the bank account side of a relationship too, you know, where it's out of nowhere one day, Don, my truck is leaking all sorts of stuff and I don't know what it's doing.
yeah, right.
You know, and at that point, you know, we had worked together and filming some stuff for a while, but I mean, we hadn't really spoken in, months, if not a year or better. And Don's in his truck, ran to a hardware store, picked up coolant,
It was a cold day.
Dude, it was a stupid cold day, and it was pitch dark, and
Started
came
snowing.
out. It was snowing, and crawled underneath the truck and fixed whatever we needed to, and gave me a ride back to his shop, and we worked on it at his shop, and he got wiring fixed, and you know he ended up spending hours and hours and hours and hours out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But you know that investment carries years.
For sure. Yeah.
But I think like, yeah, I like, what'd you call it? The bank account of friendship?
Yeah.
I like that because I've, you know, in the same vein, you know, I feel like honestly I call you for anything, right? And I think those are the people you like,
Right.
You know, I have a friend of mine. I haven't seen him face to face in a year and a half. We used to see each other every day, and I feel like I could call him. He'd be here tomorrow, and he's had to call me, and I would be there tomorrow if need be. So it's really interesting. I like that term. Those are the good friends,
For sure.
Those are the good friends. And I like the friends that don't beat you over the head for depositing or withdrawing from
And
that.
you don't have to have too many.
No, you don't.
You know?
No.
And I still say my best friend's my wife.
Yeah.
That has been a game changer.
Yeah.
And we also made a pact with each other a couple years ago. I realized she wasn't the first person I told things to. Like what I mean is like if I had a complaint about her, I would tell my buddy, right? And that got me in trouble one time. And I said, I'm done with this. Like, because I should have asked her for some advice, but I asked a buddy, and he's like, oh no, that's fine. So I did it, and my wife got really mad, and she was hurt. And from that moment, I said, you know what, I know something? You're going to be the first person I go to. You're my best friend. That only makes sense.
Yeah.
And I said, but you need to come to me first. That sounds like a really good idea, like from a man. Like we could do a woman sometimes, and she's hurt. If she hears this, she knows. But you're like, I should have never said that. Like, I don't want to hear this, you know, or whatever. But it's worked out to where she really is like, I couldn't imagine my life without my wife.
Yeah.
And she's my best friend, and she is like, she's the GOAT. She really is. And
awesome.
I think that has helped. And what I was going to say about that is not only picking your friends well, but, you know, we're all blessed to have the wives we have.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
And I think that's one thing that's totally underestimated is we rush. We see you've seen it. I've seen it. You've seen it. We see people rush into marriage or relationships with the wrong people.
Right.
And that is an investment you make that you will always pay for the rest of your life. Where if you take some time and you really think about what you're doing, you can have a partner for life that a good partner will enhance your life and make you better.
Yep.
And I think just the way the world has gone, like, you know, let's treat it like every day is a Tinder day. And then we wonder why we end up with the wrong person, you know. And people have journeys, you know. I'm witness two of my friends this year who both had, I would say, horrendous lives with their first spouses, and they got remarried this year. And you know, you're excited for them because you're like, it's a new day. You get to try a new
If my
thing.
wife's listening, we did meet on Bumble. So
Did you?
Yeah.
But it's not every.
she was my dentist first, though.
You stopped when you found
You
her, though,
rebuilt.
right?
Oh, for
You're
sure.
not-
Yeah,
that's
it
what I
wasn't.
mean. It's
It wasn't a regular thing
Right.
for me. So
I have a lot of friends I met on, and actually, I hate to admit it.
I know what
have
you
a lot
mean,
of
though. You
friends.
meant it. You meant it.
In a bad way. Like when Tinder first came out, what was
yeah.
it?
Oh,
yeah. It's a
yeah.
hookup app.
Oh,
and
yeah.
da-da-da. Yeah.
And
You
so
meant
I
it.
think, like-
100%.
But yeah, I actually, one of my really good friends, Randy, I helped him write his profile for eHarmony.
Oh, fun.
When it first came out. He was in a horrible relationship and they got divorced and it broke him.
Yeah.
And finally, after a while, I'm like, you need to get dating. So I made him a profile and he met his wife on it. And I won't forget, like, they got a date. You know, they were communicating, they got a date. And he came over to my shop. He's like, how do I look? And I'm like, you look good. And I prayed for him. And they got married. I actually did their ceremony for him. And, you know, so I think but he knew not to rush things.
Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes people do, or we underestimate.
I agree.
like,
Yeah.
My cousin used to say this to me. He'd always say, it may look good. It may look good. It may feel good, but it doesn't mean it's good for you.
Yeah.
And he said, and that's the same way with a woman. And he said, so just remember that. And I had to go through stuff and how God ever got me. With
Yeah,
Mary, I don't know.
it's interesting because I was always worried about, you know, because I didn't have too many relationships really. Like there was a serious high school girlfriend, one relationship in college, and then it was a long time because I was building my business. But like, it's crazy when me and my wife did meet. We got married in 2020, but we met 2017 or whatever, and I never really thought, like you always hear, well, you find the right person who's going to help you everywhere in life, including your business. I always thought my business would suffer. Right. Well, our business like blew up.
Right.
Once my wife, came into my life, which is, it's crazy how that, worked. I mean, we wouldn't be in this building, that we're in right now. I mean, and obviously so many other positive things too, but that was always the one thing I'm like, oh, it's going to slow me down, or it's going to not, but it's like everything, and that's how you have the right person, I think, for sure. So, well, Don, man, I appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, sorry,
I appreciate it. No, I could keep going.
I know.
I could keep going on this. I mean, I think we probably 3 hours forever, but no, I mean, I could keep going. I love talking to you. You got a lot of great stories. If any of you guys are still listening to this, which I know we have people that listen all the way through.
Are we live right now?
No, we're not.
Oh, I was gonna say I thought this was pre-recorded. Okay.
But what's your documentary called again?
It's called Chasing Hope.
Chasing Hope. I highly check it out.
Thank you. Yeah, just
highly
go to
check it out.
second.com.
Yeah, we'll put the links in.
links
That
in
people
the
have the
links,
links, so we don't have to say it here and stuff. But go check it out. I mean, like I said, I watched it twice. Just it's an inspiring story. It's a very genuine. Like you just come off on the screen there and on the documentary and in person, you come off super genuine and stuff. And it's a really inspiring story. And there's so much more to your story too that we didn't even get into today. So maybe 6 months from now or something, you can get back on here.
Holler at me.
But
I'll come on over.
But yeah, man, it's awesome what you're doing. Keep going, making a positive impact in the world, because the world needs it for sure. So appreciate it, man.
Thanks. Appreciate you. Thanks for all you're doing.
You bet.
Seriously.
Thanks everyone for listening.
I'm sorry.
No, dude. No. This is the second one we had to go 3 hours.
All right, that makes me feel a little better.
No.